When the 2026 Formula One grid lines up, you'll hear about a smaller chassis, weight drops, and sustainable fuels. But if you design things for a living, you can ignore all of that. The actual shift in these regulations has nothing to do with combustion or wheelbases. This diagram illustrates the core change. The 2026 car is the first mainstream vehicle in history whose shape is a variable. It is no longer a single fixed form. For a century, designing a vehicle meant resolving one static silhouette. By forcing the car to physically reconfigure while in motion, that single-answer philosophy is entirely broken. Since the beginning of automotive manufacturing, the end goal has always been a static object, immovable surfaces meant to hold a single posture forever. The entire industry built its culture around the hero shot, that perfect, frozen three-quarter view that dictates a vehicle's entire visual identity. Designers operated under the assumption that the object itself is a noun. It travels through space, but its own geometry remains strictly locked in place. You spent years hunting for one definitive answer to the brief. Now, the new regulations demand multiple, simultaneous answers from the exact same vehicle. The engineering catalyst here is active aerodynamics. For the first time, both the front and rear wings of the F1 car will move together as a single coordinated system. This maps how it works, starting with corner mode. Flaps angle sharply upward, creating massive downforce for maximum grip through a bend. But watch it switch into straight mode. The flaps flatten entirely, shedding drag to chase top speed. The driver actively triggers this switch anytime they hit a straightaway, lasting longer than 3 seconds, manually toggling the car into its low-drag state. The object stops being a single shape. Instead, it becomes a high downforce shape, a low-drag shape, and a defined path of motion between the two extremes. This creates an immediate problem during the initial concept phase. You can't just sketch a single beautiful silhouette anymore. If you try to finalize the form first and figure out the moving parts later, you end up with a mechanical afterthought bolted onto a shape that was clearly never meant to move. The car's identity must survive being in constant motion. It needs to look intentional and coherent whether flaps are fully open or locked down. The movement itself becomes the core design challenge. You are defining behavioral logic, deciding how the surfaces react to physics, rather than just styling an exterior. Formula One is just making this visible at 300 kilometers per hour. This kinetic shift is already making its way into consumer vehicles. Modern hypercars were early adopters, acting like road-going aircraft. Active flaps are built right into the Pagani Huayra's carbon fiber, splitting airflow mid-corner. Now, adaptive ride heights, deployable rear spoilers, and active grille shutters are standard features on daily drivers. The rigid boundary separating mechanical engineering from pure aesthetic styling is disappearing. When the starting grid arrives at Spa for the Belgian Grand Prix, the early renders suggest the 2026 designs will look awkward, dividing opinion. But that visual tension isn't a failure of the design teams. It's the expected friction of an industry trying to master a completely new way of building things. The manufacturers that succeed over the next decade will stop sketching static forms. They will conceptualize systems of shapes from the very first draft. The vehicle stops being a noun. A designed object will no longer be judged by how it looks standing still, but by how it behaves in motion.